Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the sources to find those key insights, getting you instantly up to speed. Today, we're diving into a really detailed, very personal story of what seems to be a near-death experience, an NDE.
That's right. And this isn't about statistics or general trends today. We're focusing very specifically on one man identified as Volker F.
Yeah.
His experience back in 2014, it presents some really fascinating, almost paradoxical elements.
Okay.
So our mission, if you like, is to dissect his particular journey, what triggered it, the emotional state he entered, and also to understand the internal conflict, but also the hope that this single experience created for him.
All right, let's unpack this. Usually when you think NDEs, you think, cardiac arrest, near drowning, something life-threatening.
Right, classic triggers.
But for Volker F., the event was, well, incredibly painful, but not technically putting his life on the line. He was actually waiting for surgery for a severely fractured wrist. The sources say the bones were cracked like 30 or 40 times. It sounds horrific.
Just, yeah, agonizing. And that pain, that's the crucial part here. He didn't lose consciousness because his heart stopped or anything like that. It was the sheer overwhelming pain while waiting for help that just overloaded his system.
So essentially a pain-induced blackout.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's why the source material classifies this as a probable NDE. It ticks a lot of the boxes for the experience itself, but the trigger, that extreme trauma and pain without an immediate life threat, it kind of stretches our usual definitions. It almost suggests that maybe the profound change in consciousness needed for an NDE isn't only tied to biological death nearing. It could potentially be triggered by these moments of just ultimate physical or sensory extremity.
Wow, that's actually a pretty big potential insight for NDE research, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the trigger might be the brain's response to overwhelming suffering itself, not just, lack of oxygen or system failure.
Absolutely. It definitely broadens the possibilities. But okay, so the physical situation was chaos and agony. The internal experience, though, completely the opposite.
All right, this is where it gets really compelling. He describes sort of collapsing slowly. He could still hear his wife calling for help, but the instant his consciousness actually faded, his whole internal reality just flipped.
And the main thing about that internal reality, it was overwhelmingly pleasant. That's the word he used. He talked about entering the state of infinite peace, calm, and security. And he really emphasized that this was a feeling totally new to him, something he'd never known before. And that feeling of security, it apparently stayed with him, had a lasting impact for years.
And we really have to pause on that because of his background. The sources mention that Volker F. in his everyday life, he suffers from heavy depression and anxiety attacks.
Its contrast is just staggering. Yeah. I mean, for someone whose normal reality is marked by anxiety, by depression, that constant mental burden, to suddenly be in a state of infinite calm and security, that's more than just nice. It's like the total opposite of his suffering.
He actually said he wondered if all this, meaning the depression and anxiety, was gone for this short time. And he felt he could have just stayed there forever. It wasn't just a rest. It was like finding the cure he never knew existed, even if just temporarily.
And this brings us to maybe the most confusing part, his own analysis of his mental state during the experience. You ask most people about a profound spiritual event, they might assume like super awareness, right? Hyper alertness.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But Volker F. reported that his level of consciousness, his alertness during the NDE was actually less than his normal everyday state.
Wait, hang on. How can you feel infinite peace, total relief from psychological pain, but report being less alert than usual? That doesn't seem to add up.
It is counterintuitive by normal logic, absolutely. Yet he explicitly states that even though he felt less alert in that conventional sense, he felt profoundly free. So it challenges this common idea that NDEs have to involve some kind of super consciousness where you're more aware than ever. Maybe, just maybe, for him, freedom meant the absence of all that mental noise, the anxiety, the depression that usually filled his head. Less conscious processing, perhaps, but more peace.
That's a really powerful idea, that ultimate freedom, for him, wasn't about being hyper-aware, but about being blissfully, almost simply relieved. Okay, so what about the visuals? Was it purely an emotional feeling, or was there more to it?
Oh, it was definitely experiential. He did report seeing a light, a very bright white light, but he was clear it wasn't just like a bright lamp. He called it an unearthly light. Specifically, a circular light radiating peace. The visual and the emotion were intertwined.
And this incredible otherworldly light. He said it didn't scare me at all.
No fear, only peace, acceptance. And that unearthly quality, it extended to the whole environment. He felt like he'd entered an unearthly world, or maybe a clearly mystical or unearthly realm. He described floating in this space, with that peaceful light around him.
Okay, so we've got the emotional core, infinite peace, the trigger, extreme pain, the setting, this unearthly realm, the light. But now, let's run through the sort of standard NDE checklist, because what was missing from his account is just as telling, isn't it?
That's a really crucial point, yes. If you look at the common elements people report, Volker F's experience is notably sparse in some ways. For instance, zero feeling of being separate from his body. No out-of-body experience, the OBE, which is usually quite common.
Right. And cognitively, too, there were big omissions.
Big time. You often hear about thoughts speeding up incredibly fast, or time distorting, or that classic life review flashing before your eyes. He said, nope. Thoughts weren't sped up, time felt normal. His senses, vision, hearing, they weren't more vivid than usual. No scenes from his past, no glimpses of the future.
And no beings encountered either. No guides, no deceased relatives, no religious figures.
None whatsoever. It was a completely solitary experience, focused entirely on the atmosphere, the emotion, and that light. He wasn't even sure about the tunnel idea. He saw the white light, yes, but didn't confirm traveling through any kind of tunnel to get there.
So, with all those classic bits missing, why is it still considered a probable NDE? What kept it in that category?
Because it held on to those core mystical and emotional components. That deep, profound, almost indescribable peace. The sense of being in an unearthly place. And critically, this feeling of oneness.
Ah, right, the unity aspect. He felt united or one with the world.
Exactly. And when he tried to put a label on that whole profoundly pleasant state, the calm, the peace, the security, the unity, he concluded, it could also be called love. Yeah. It wasn't just an emotion he felt, it was like the nature of the realm itself, a state of being connected to everything there.
Which makes the next part, his spiritual background, even more interesting. Because we're talking about someone who had this incredibly profound, arguably spiritual experience, yet his religious identity, before and after, is listed as unaffiliated atheist.
Yeah, that's the textbook conflict, isn't it? Experience versus belief. He does mention that his friends, apparently including a pastor, see him as a seeker for faith, but he himself maintained that atheist identification.
So, what happens when someone who identifies as an atheist has an experience that feels intensely spiritual, unearthly, unifying?
Well, according to him, the content of the experience was entirely not consistent with the beliefs he held. It didn't fit his framework at all. But, and this is key, it didn't necessarily convert him. Instead, it gave him something else. Hope. He wasn't suddenly convinced God existed, but he said, and this is a quote, "I hope that God and Jesus do exist, or at least this peaceful transition into death exists."
So the NDE didn't overhaul his philosophy, but it completely reframed how he thought about, well, the end, about dying.
Precisely. It offered hope for the destination, you could say. But here's another twist, another paradox. Despite how powerful and deeply peaceful this experience was, the sources are clear that it didn't lead to major outward changes in his life.
What do you mean? You'd think finding the antidote to lifelong anxiety, even briefly, would make someone change everything, right? Taste that feeling.
You might think so. But he reported no significant shifts in his values. His core beliefs didn't change. His relationships stayed the same. His general approach to life didn't alter post-NDE. The main tangible takeaway for him was this new hope that passing away might actually be peaceful, maybe even wonderful. The impact seems purely existential, looking forward, rather than practical or changing his day-to-day.
That's almost a bit anticlimactic from a self-help angle, maybe.
Yeah.
But incredibly honest psychologically, the memory didn't fix his Monday morning, but it did transform his view of what might come after all the Monday mornings are done.
And that really ties into the reality factor for him. He is absolutely convinced it was real. Even 9 years later, he insists he can recall the feeling 100% and firmly believes the experience was definitely real. His reasoning, it was just indescribable, completely unique. Nothing in his normal life ever came close. That profound meaning, that hope for a potentially beautiful transition, that's what stuck.
Wow. This walk through Volker F's account has been quite something. We've looked at this really profound, quite unique experience, infinite peace, unearthly light sparked not by imminent death, but by intense pain, and offering this stark, temporary relief from his daily struggles with depression and anxiety.
Exactly. And I think the real power of this specific story is how it managed to instill such lasting hope. That possibility, that visceral sense that the final transition might be wonderful, landing in someone who identified as an atheist. It really shows that the knowledge gained from these experiences can be deeply emotional, focused on what might come, rather than demanding immediate life changes. It was hope for peace, even if perhaps that peace only arrives when ordinary consciousness fades.
So if we leave you with one final thought to chew on, maybe it's this. Considering Volker F's intense, lifelong battle with depression and anxiety, and the incredible peace he found in this specific state, what does it really mean that his most liberating, most profoundly peaceful memory happened when, by his own account, his level of consciousness was actually less than normal? Could it be that the absence of the psychological weight we carry every day is what truly defines that unearthly realm more than some kind of heightened super-awareness? Something to ponder next time your own consciousness feels like it's running a bit too fast?
Thank you for listening to Borrowed Time NDE Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss a moment of inspiration. Until next time, wishing you an extraordinary and truly wonderful time on your journey through life.